Wow, that took a lot longer than I thought it would. I apologize for the extended video entrance, but, you know, any video footage of the Dragonzord was always very, very pleasing. Unfortunately, for this video review, the introduction of the Dragonzord took longer than I thought it would, because it takes place over the course of over half an episode. I trimmed it down as best I could to all the really essential parts, but it still ran 5 minutes, so I apologize for that. And for some strange reason, I couldn't find any fighting footage of the alternate Mega-Dragonzord mode fighting just by itself when it wasn't involved with the Ultra Zord. But I think that little nostalgia trip was very much worth it, because most Power Ranger fans will agree that the Dragonzord was one of their absolute favorite designs to come out of Power Rangers. And I mean, even years later, one of their favorites. Can't say as I blame them either. One of the things, if I may comment for a moment here, one of the things that the earlier years of Power Rangers, one of the things the Zords never did was emphasize their surface details. There wasn't, I mean, there was a couple of panel lines and little here and there, and, you know, structural supports and blah, blah, blah. There was stuff like that. But there was never really any, you know, real surface detail, real significant power. Panel lines. Blech. Go Power Rangers. Power, right there. It was always more about their general shape and the colors and how they functioned and things like that. So they're, you know, this is probably the most detailed part of the Dragonzord right there, and then the teeth as well. So one of the things I dislike about the Dragonzord, and this is not from H, this is simply how the toy worked, is those upper teeth were always there. The mouth always seemed to drop down a little bit, because if you look at the eyes, which are not nearly as bright as they were on the show, by the way, you see the eyes kind of look down like he's stoned or something. It's like he's going, I always thought he was doing that, which is kind of weird. And it didn't matter how hard you try and push down on this. The upper teeth always showed up. And you can never close the mouth either. That was something I always wished it could have done. Other posability are all transformation joints. I always loved the fact that the guy in the stunt suit always had to contend with the fact that the Dragonzord didn't have any shoulder joints. That's always funny to see him rocking his torso side to side. It's like, I can't move in this tin can. Ratcheting very nicely. And by the way, hips and knees on a deluxe-sized Zord. In the first season, by the way, I'll ratchet very nicely. Very nicely indeed. Whoa, that's a lot more faded than I thought it was. Eesh. The only other posability, if you can really call it that, is that yes, the tail can move back and forth. Actually, the joint in there was actually kind of interesting how they constructed that. And technically it can spin, but it's not really supposed to. And the only reason that this tilts up like this, by the way, this is made of PVC, the whole thing. The only reason that this can tilt up is because when you set it on a flat surface, if you didn't have it bend like that, then the tail would push up on it, and it would lean it up at a weird angle. So, yeah, it kind of needed to do that. That's it for the details, features of the Dragonzord. And the other important feature of the Dragonzord was its light and sound function. 2 AA batteries, and the only sound it made was this. And that's it. It was really annoying, and the sound wasn't on the show, but goddamn, the chest lit up just like it did in the show. This thing was awesome. To get the Dragonzord into fighting mode, if I may interject something here really quickly, I have never, ever, ever referred to this mode that I'm about to show you as Dragonzord in fighting mode. Honestly, why else would you call the Dragonzord if you don't want it to do fighting? I don't care if they were underpaid writers or not. They were idiots. They couldn't even come up with good dialogue for the debut show. I mean, for crying out loud. Anyways, the Saber-tooth, Tiger, Triceratops, and Mastodon are set up exactly the same way. But make sure that you remove the power cannons, whatever these things are called, because they're not used in this mode. One of the things the kids learned very early on that the instructions did not speak of is that you learn to hang on to the hips whenever you remove that tail. Because if you don't, well, it's a good thing there's carpet down there. That would happen. So you always remember to hold the hips in place. But ironically, the next step is to remove the center of the torso. Anyways. And the part you didn't see in the show, and the part you did see in the show, kind of, is you actually split that open, that, like that. And then the interesting thing is, you'd only see the last part of this. You would actually see them slam together like so. Okay? Now it's ready. There's actually a subtle detail that is surprisingly important in the combination between the Mastodon and the Dragonzord. See these lines right here? These rather simple, out-of-the-way, nothing to write about, home about lines? They actually interact with the grooves here along the Mastodon. So you actually do have to line those up perfectly and make certain that the thing's pushed in place properly before you can snap the arms into place, which I always found kind of interesting. Plug these in. And then the one detail, you can do it this way, you can do it when the chest is open, but it was always awesome to do it this way. Just make certain that you have your finger down lightly on this, because if you hold it down the whole time, the mouth won't open at all. Anyways, you pull this down. Oh, look, his jaw is disconnecting. And then you put that down. I never quite understood why it is that the Dragonzord's tail had that little, I don't know, little tab thingy right there, and it forced you to plug it in a certain direction. Like, I never understood that. Anyways, you push that in. That used to snap in tighter than it does now. You snap that in place, and then you take this accessory piece, which was sitting off to the side conveniently. You had to assemble it out of the box. And you snap that into place like that. And there you have the Mega-Dragonzord, along with the, oh, what do they call this thing? The Dragon Staff? Dragon Drill Staff? Something like that? Power Drill? Whatever. I'm sorry, the Dragonzord in fighting mode. What the hell kind of name is that? Seriously? One of the things that I really enjoy about giant robos is that they have an animal's face, or, you know, an alternate face representing their alternate modes sitting above the main robo's head. That's always awesome, you know. Even though it's, you know, it's just the face of a new robo, it looks kind of shaman or witch doctor, or I don't know the phrase. It looks awesome. But unfortunately it comes at a bit of a cost, because the crest here, the crown, means that the head is always loose, and behind his face you always get these teeth, which always looks really weird. Although, to be fair, he does make a rather awesome replacement for Ratchet. The parents are very irritating. Yeah. Hey, that's my line. Oh, shut up. No one liked you in the movies, and no one liked you as a toy either. But I digress. There is a gigantic Green Ranger Dragonzord logo that takes up the whole chest. It's a little stylized because it's got these things up here, but man, that thing's awesome. You know what's even more awesome? He's got hidden artillery sitting in his chest. That's always great. Pop-out weapons, that's always fun. Arms, legs, don't really need to go over it. Oddly, the pattern that's behind these decals is exactly the same. Why'd they even bother putting decals on there? It's a little boring right there, but whatever. I never understood why it is that they've got these little red dots sitting right there. Here's another big problem that a lot of people have complained about with the Mega-Dragonzord mode. This is what happens, Bandai, when you stick too many false lightning bolts on a Deluxe transforming Zord. You get this mess right here. And all the way out, by the way, those lightning bolts go all the way around to the back of his skivvies. Oh yeah, and by the way, this is my bad right here. These should actually be reversed, but I didn't know better at the time. And he's got part of a tail sticking out his backside. Oh well. So that's it for this part. And then there's the aptly named Power Staff, which was always awesome. Yeah, it's a little flimsy by today's standards, but there isn't really anything you could do about it. It's also a little thicker than the standard, but whatever. Which came with its own clawed toad base, which was kind of cool. Unfortunately, you had to contend with this thing, which was a real squishy pain in the ass, and here's why. In the show, the Mega-Dragonzord just hangs onto the thing, and that's it, and then it drills it through, and yeah, this is really choreographed really well. But the toy, unfortunately, couldn't do that. You had to have, I mean, there's nothing for it to hang on to. You couldn't have had something sticking out the back or something. No, you had this, I don't even know what this thing is. It doesn't even look good. It looks completely out of place, and the best you could do with it, as I showed you a moment ago, this right here is why nobody liked it. Let me get a little closer. I rehearsed this really well. It didn't even fit on here that well. It just sat there, and it was annoying as hell, and nobody liked it, and it was just very poorly designed. They couldn't have had little handle or something sticking on the back here. No, they just had this thing. So the best thing you could hope for is just to let it sit there. I mean, what kind of weapon is that? Awesome and stately as that may look, to have the Mega-Dragonzord just have the staff sitting aside was no fun whatsoever. But it still looked awesome. I always thought there was a little bit of an issue with the size of the Deluxe Power Zords, because, you know, in the series they were supposed to be the same height. Whatever. Anyways, to get the alternate Mega-Dragonzord formed, which is what I called it, you simply put these down and fold the horns back. And forming the alternate Mega-Dragonzord starts out the same way. Pull the tail out, make certain you're hanging onto the hips, except that this time you have to juggle this thing. Yeah, kind of like that. Although you want to keep these separated. Fold the legs around. It's a bit of an issue when you do it this way, which is probably why you want to fold the legs up before you start separating things. So I'll put the hands away. And then something new. Fold this down. And fold this down. And really, that's the only difference. I mean, at this point, yes, it was quite a bit unmanageable. I mean, really, there's no difference between, you know, folding the head down, folding these over, and splitting it apart. And then you fit the Dragonzord onto there. Now, you'll notice two things. One, the top of the Megazord's head pushes up against the jaw of the Dragonzord, and as a result, and you don't really notice this in the show, they kind of play it down, but what happens is the crest, if you push down, let's see, if you push down on the crest, you can see not only does it push up against the top of the Megazord's head, but it actually opens up the mouth a little bit. So what you end up doing is you actually have to raise the crest, and then this will fit down a little cleaner. And there you have the alternate Mega-Dragonzord. I've always thought of the alternate version of the Mega-Dragonzord as the Megazord wearing some kind of an animal-themed cloak over it. You know, bearskin cloak, and then having the head sitting on top, because it hangs over the shoulders and the arms quite nicely. And what have I said about over-the-shoulder cannons? Let's be honest here. Since when are over-the-shoulder cannons on a giant robot not sexy in some fashion? Exactly. It didn't cover anything much in back, but it just fit it real nicely. Very intimidating because it's really wide. Because you had another pair of energy cannons, shield projectors, whatever these things are called, sitting on the sides as well. Weapons along the outside of the arms as opposed to over the arms. That doesn't happen very often. Still, cool enough. Although, Unfortunately, the accessory upgrade, I guess you could say, that happens with the Mega-Dragonzord, not as cool, because what you could do is, I can't remember which side goes on which, so I'm just going to do this. You can attach the Dragonzord's tail and chest units onto the Mega-Dragonzord. Not quite as imposing this way, because it's very lopsided appearance, although I always imagined it had some kind of spinning attack where the Mega-Dragonzord would spin really fast on the spot, and then these things would twirl outwards like this. Then you'd have the laser chest shield thing spinning, and then you'd have the drill going at the same time. But, whatever. It always looked better, and everybody agreed on it. It always looked better without these things attached. And you know what? I wholeheartedly agree with that. For me, the Dragonzord is one of those rare cases of a toy that almost never was. There have been numerous occasions throughout my life where I've gotten just within striking range of a particular item that I wanted to get. And nowadays it's usually a case of me waiting too long for discounts that never come, or just simply not having enough money to work with at the time. But there were times when I was younger where I was dependent on my parents, of course, to get me my toys, and I wasn't a collector back then. I was just getting toys because they were cool. If I may indulge for a moment of nostalgia here, the first example of this was the Mirage from Silverhawks. Yeah, it was big, yeah, it was awkward, yeah, it was clunky, but my God, that thing was neat looking. But my mom had to literally drag me out of the Toys R Us when I found out they were sold out. I had plenty of the action figures. Yes, I was into action figures at one time, in case you're wondering. But that was a day that shall live in infamy. The next example of this would be Starcom, which I don't know how many of you remember this, but there was a time when small magnets were allowed in toys. This is before the company started realizing that kids could actually break them off and swallow them because they were too young to have the toys in the first place. Anyway, Starcom was really cool because it had little wind-up motors and magnet-powered features, and those things were just amazing. I have maybe 5 vehicles and, a bunch of little action figures. Yes, I collected action figures at one time. And then I found out, oh yeah, there was a whole other second season of them that never came over to the US. And it was also a TV series. God damn it! Then there was that LEGO Ultimate Collector's Imperial Star Destroyer a couple of years ago, which, I finally had enough money, and guess what? They sold out. Ah! So the Dragonzord was going to be another case of disappointment. Went to the store, they're completely sold out. And then, lo and behold, on my 11th birthday, I think, my parents totally got me a Dragonzord, which was totally awesome. And then I did something kind of stupid, and I was grounded the day afterwards, and actually lost the Dragonzord for 3 weeks. What they don't realize is that I was sneaking into their room for a couple of those days to play around with it. So awesome. Yeah, the Dragonzord didn't quite have the sound effects that it did in the show, and it would have been nice to have it do a little more than this. But at least the lights flashed, and it made a noise. This, of course, from a time where we didn't care if the toy sounded like it did in the show or not. So long as it made noise and it lit up the way it did in the show, that was just fine with us. That was just fine with me, too. And after having adjusted to the lack of posability on the Deluxe Megazord, the lack of posability on the Dragonzord wasn't that big of an issue. Because, well, the Dragonzord's arm never did any more than this. Although you kind of wish the wrist could turn up instead of down. But, whatever. It was awesome, though, to be able to have legs that could do this, even if it was a little bit. But they were able to do that was just, totally awesome. You could pose it in a bunch of different ways. You could actually have them walking around. And the thing I like about it, even today, it doesn't just stand straight up like this, but it actually tilts at a slight angle forward. Let's see. Yeah, it tilts at a slight angle forward, which I do actually like, because that does give it some character. And yeah, it's totally because the tail would, bump into the ground and such, but it just gives it a little more character. It gives it kind of a rounded profile, which I really, really like. And it's just stocky, and it's round, and it's just awesome sauce, In fact, the only thing I ever had a problem with is that the legs were, first of all, too short. That was a big problem. Proportionately, from the crotch up, the Dragonzord is just fine. But when you get to the legs, they're a little too stubby. They're a little too stumpy. Just too short. They look fine in profile, but when you look at them from the front as well, really narrow here. Now, obviously, they need that in order to, that was kind of a frustrating thing. You need the lower legs to be real thin in order to be able to do this. So that's understandable. Still, that didn't prevent me from wanting it. So yeah, that was really the only big problem I had. The other problem I had, at least in Dragonzord mode, was the tail didn't have much flash to it. I found out later that the Japanese version, the Dragon Caesar, which I'll get to later, had a vacuum metallized chrome colored tail, which would have been awesome. So yeah, the Dragonzord was very satisfying in a lot of different ways. For those of you wondering what the differences are between the Deluxe Dragonzord and its original Japanese counterpart, the DX Dragon Caesar from the 1992 Super Sentai series, Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger, the changes were almost exclusively decals. There were a few that they kept, you know, the neck, this little one right here on the chest, the finger missile launchers, the knee guards. There were a few things that they kept. The decal over here along the shoulder, but the majority of them, or I should say the rest of them, oh yeah, the ones along the tail here, those were all similar, but otherwise the rest of them were changed. Now, to be clear, there wasn't nearly as much English on the Daijujin as there was on the Dragon Caesar. That sounds about right. There wasn't any English on here. There was a little bit of on here. So yeah, it's understandable why they changed that. Really, the only offending part was they had the Z located in a couple different areas, including along the bottom of the feet for... Oh, I'm sorry, I can't remember what that thing's called off the top of my head. I don't know the names very well of some of the earlier Power Rangers Super Sentai stuff. Anyways, getting way off topic, yeah, those were really the big changes they made to the decals. The other change I noted was that the vacuum metallized chrome plastic on the tail was removed and just swapped with that plain old plastic. I haven't been able to find a reliable video of the Dragon Caesar, the toy of the Dragon Caesar, so I'm not certain if the sound, I just assume that the sound is the same and the blinking is the same, because it would be unusual for Bandai to swap those things out back in, what was it, 93. So, yeah. Oh, by the way, I just found out a little while ago that this MOOC has been updated to 2011 for the 35th anniversary series, Kaizoku Sentai Gokaiger. Yeah, I'm totally going to get one of those if I can find it in stock. I kind of wish they'd translate this thing into English, though. There's a lot of useful information in here, and I'm sure there's more than a few Super Sentai fans who speak only English who would love to read it as well. You listening, Bandai? Nowhere is it more readily apparent that the designers at Bandai America in 2003 got the decals wrong on the Dragonzord than when you put it into the first Mega-Dragonzord mode. Because you've got 1, 2, 3 pairs of lightning bolts, 4 pairs, 5 pairs of lightning bolts across this whole thing. And it was really, that was something that I never liked. It's like, what happened to the giant Z's that was sitting right here? The frilly decals that they had along those areas there, I mean, that was cool. But to have a ton of lightning bolts, that was never satisfying for me ever. Oh yeah, and then they totally effed up the shoulder decals from the Daijujin. So, but anyways, I mean, for the most part it works, but yeah, changes in the decals there really, really lets it down. I mean, it's nice they have the green and all, but I'm starting to ramble here. Of course I'm rambling. This is the ending commentary. Oh yeah, and then you totally had another pair of lightning bolts sitting right there, so that was a bit annoying as well. As I mentioned earlier, the staff was a little long, and it actually wiggles around quite a bit, whatever. But it's this thing. Nobody ever liked this thing, because it's just this pooey little plastic. I know I went over this earlier, but it's certainly worth mentioning once again. That nobody ever liked the Mega-Dragonzord. I mean, the Mega-Dragonzord need to be able to hold the damn thing, not just peg it in and let it just sit there. Although that should be landed squarely on Plex, I suppose. Actually, it's kind of a nice angle right there. I think I'll just leave it like that. Yeah, squeaky tripod, new. Not only did I love the fact that the Mega-Dragonzord had a giant dragon claw emblem across his chest that was three-dimensional, and it had a rather awesome drill staff thingy sitting over here. But one thing that always sold it for me, you can't really deal with it on the toy, but very much in the show, and this is very, was it Gundam Double Zeta kind of thing, is it had these massive knee pads on them, which I really, really enjoyed. That was always a big highlight for me. That's actually one of my favorite features of the Mega-Dragonzord Mode 1. And I think I'll mess around with this thing again, just because I have nothing better to do with myself. And of course I mentioned earlier how loose the head is. So, yeah, that was a bit of an issue. But I've been living with it for the better part of 18 years. I'm not about to start hating it now. We didn't get to see the Mega-Dragonzord Mode 2 very often, but whenever you did see it, you knew that that Ultrazord combination wasn't very far behind, which was just the greatest feeling in the world ever when that thing showed up! But the Mega-Dragonzord Mode 2 was also in an excellent position of being very enjoyable just by itself, because you had all 5 of the Dinozords involved, plus the Dragonzord was there. Which, you know, how can you go wrong with that? You can't possibly. Oh, and by the way, not only does it have over-the-shoulder cannons, but it also has along-the-arm cannons. Can those be called cannons? So yeah, when this thing came out, it was just totally awesome sauce. I need to find me some new exclamations. In fact, the only time that the Mega-Dragonzord didn't look good is when you tried and attached these things. Not just because they weren't on the show, but just because it simply looks unbalanced. I mean, yeah, it might have been cool, and maybe they did use it in Zyuranger, but as a toy, it just... Nah, that doesn't work for me. So we'll just take these things off. And really the only problem I ever had with the Mega-Dragonzord Mode 2 is that the head, the antenna thing, in the series, it was always tilted back like this, but you couldn't do that with the toy. You always had to have it up. Which, I don't know, always made it look like he was wearing a party favor hat or something. A really narrow party favor hat. Some sort of strange fin sitting on the top of his head. Oh well, it was awesome nonetheless. Oh, speaking of remastered Mighty Morphin Power Rangers in 2010, I cannot tell you how many questions and comments and complaints we have gotten at CollectionDX.com. When are they going to reissue the Dragonzord? They did it with the Megazord and Titanus. When are we going to be getting the Dragonzord? You know what? Well, you know what? There is no such thing as a reissued Dragonzord, okay? It never happened. Not once have I, Ava Unit 4A, ever seen a pre-production photo, a promotional photo. I haven't seen any video. I haven't seen anything about a remastered Deluxe Dragonzord. It simply didn't happen. Yeah, they were going to reissue it, but for whatever reason, when the Power Rangers brand was transferred over to Saban for 2011, it just never happened. I don't have insider information, so I can't say with any certainty at this point whether Bandai America will ever release the remastered Dragonzord, although I would seriously doubt it at this point, since they're moving on with Power Rangers Samurai and whatever comes up in 2012. So, I know by bringing it up, people are going to ask, but could you please stop bringing it up? Because that is really, really tiresome and mind-numbingly irritating at this point. So you're just going to have to settle for the original, just like I did. Yeah, something like that. Whew. I was just about to close out this video review when I realized that I forgot to mention that the Deluxe Dragonzord also came with a fully articulated 9-inch Green Ranger, who came with inaccurate, what do you call these things, gauntlet painting decals. He didn't have any paint detail in back, which he should have. Where are the little bra straps, though? What happened to those? Let's see what else. This thing could come off. I don't know why, but it did. Oh, yeah, so you could attach it to the Red Ranger. He comes with a series inaccurate blaster weapon. Why the hell didn't they make a Dragon Dagger for him? Anyways. I'll go for that later. And he also comes with an obvious Godzilla, Dragonzord, decal on the chest. Okay, so, yeah, there's the 9-inch Green Ranger, which I totally got this set for.